Hello friends. Welcome to the DXD Tales. How are you all? So we are back with an interesting movie on what if Issei was the primordial sage of space W. Ho bended realities Issei x Rias Gremory x Rossweisse. Also be sure to subscribe and like this video. Now let's begin. Chapter 1. Fragments of Eternity. The universe breathed between Issei Hyodo's fingertips. Though no one else could see it. Standing on Kuo Academy's rooftop, he absently twisted his wrist in a motion that, to anyone watching, would seem like nothing more than a boy stretching his hand. In reality, he was unconsciously folding a microscopic pocket of space 200 feet above the school grounds, creating a momentary dimensional aberration that caused cherry blossom petals to momentarily flow upward against gravity before resuming their natural descent. Issei himself didn't fully understand what he'd done. These episodes had been happening with increasing frequency over the past 3 months. Small distortions in reality that occurred spontaneously when his mind wandered. Sometimes colors would invert in his peripheral vision. Other times, he'd reach for something and find distance itself had compressed to deliver the object directly to his hand. "There you are," came a voice behind him, melodic and measured with a hint of aristocratic polish. "Student council's looking for you again." Rias Gremory stepped onto the rooftop, crimson hair catching afternoon sunlight in ways that seemed to defy ordinary physics. Not that Issei was one to judge what constituted ordinary physics lately. "What's the charge this time?" Issei asked, turning to face her with a half-smile that revealed nothing of his inner turmoil. "Existing suspiciously. Breathing without a permit." Rias laughed, a sound like water flowing over polished stones. "Apparently you somehow accessed the faculty server and corrected Professor Haraga's advanced calculus exam before he distributed it." "Did I?" Issei genuinely couldn't recall doing this. "That doesn't sound like me. 17 differential equations had errors. You not only fixed them but left notes explaining the corrections." Rias studied him with those unnervingly perceptive blue-green eyes. Haraga was simultaneously furious and impressed. He said the corrections used mathematical principles that aren't taught until university. A familiar chill traversed Issei's spine. Another gap in his memory, another inexplicable action he couldn't account for. He maintained his casual demeanor while internally cataloging this incident alongside dozens of others. "Maybe I have an evil twin," he suggested with a shrug that belied his discomfort. "Or a really helpful ghost." "Maybe you're not what you appear to be," Rias countered. Stepping closer. For a fraction of a second, Issei thought he saw something behind her polite smile, a flash of awareness that hinted at her own supernatural nature. He'd suspected for months that Rias Gremory wasn't entirely human, though he couldn't articulate how he knew this. Before he could respond, pain lanced through his temples, and the sky above them rippled. Just for an instant, the blue expanse seemed to fold inward like fabric, revealing a momentary glimpse of something vast and incomprehensible, geometries that shouldn't exist, colors with no names in human language. "Issei." Rias's voice sounded distant. "Are you all right?" He blinked, and reality reasserted itself. "Fine," he managed, despite the lingering echo of something ancient reverberating through his consciousness. "Just a headache." Rias looked unconvinced but didn't press further. "The Occult Research Club is meeting this afternoon. You should join us." "The what now?" "My club. We study supernatural phenomena." She handed him a small card with an ornate symbol. "Consider this a formal invitation." As Issei accepted the card, their fingers brushed. The contact sent a cascade of starlight behind his eyes, a momentary vision of Rias surrounded by crimson energy shaped like bat wings. "I'll think about it," he said, keeping his voice neutral despite the revelation. Whatever Rias Gremory truly was, she had just confirmed his suspicions that she wasn't entirely human. Which made 2 of them. The dreams had started 6 months ago. Dreams of endless void and stardust. Of watching galaxies spiral into existence from nothing. Dreams where Issei floated in primordial darkness, not as an observer but as an architect, a fundamental force given consciousness. In these dreams, he remembered everything. His true name, unpronounceable in human language. His purpose as the sage who maintained the boundaries between realities. The eons spent in solitude, watching universes bloom and wither. And he remembered his decision to forget, to incarnate as a human child, to experience reality from within rather than beyond, to understand the mortal perspective after countless millennia of cosmic detachment. Tonight's dream was different, more urgent, more real. Issei stood in an endless field of stars, facing a mirror that reflected not his teenage human form but his true self, a being of light and spatial geometry, beautiful and terrifying in its complexity. The boundaries grow thin, his reflection spoke, voice resonating with the frequency of neutron stars. The void stirs. You must remember. Quote, remember what? Issei asked, his human voice seeming small against the vastness surrounding them. Remember yourself, primordial sage. The reflection rippled like disturbed water. The seals you placed upon your power weaken. If you do not control your awakening, reality around you will fracture. I don't understand, Issei protested. I'm just a high school student. You are infinitely more. The mirror cracked, starlight bleeding through the fissures. And they are coming. The harbingers sense your stirring. They hunger for what you protect. Who's coming? What do I protect? Everything, his reflection answered as the mirror shattered completely, fragments dissolving into cosmic dust. You protect everything. Issei woke gasping, his bedroom warping around him. The walls breathed inward and outward like lungs, the ceiling momentarily became transparent to reveal the infinite cosmos beyond, and gravity reversed for 3 heartbeats before normalizing. He sat up, pressing palms against his eyes until the disorientation passed. This was the 3rd night this week he'd woken to find reality misbehaving around him. Whatever was happening was accelerating. Glancing at his clock, 3:33 a.m., always 3:33 when these episodes occurred, Issei reached for the journal he'd started keeping. He documented each incident meticulously, searching for patterns that might explain what was happening to him. As he wrote, a small object on his desk caught his attention, Rias's invitation card. The ornate symbol seemed to pulse with subtle energy in the dim light. He picked it up, turning it over in his fingers. Perhaps it was time to seek answers beyond himself. If Rias Gremory studied supernatural phenomena, maybe she could help him understand what he was becoming. Or what he had always been. The old schoolhouse at the edge of Kuo Academy's grounds existed in a peculiar state of simultaneous decay and immaculate preservation. Approaching it the following afternoon, Issei noted how the building seemed to occupy a slightly different position in space than it had yesterday when he'd passed by. Not that it had physically moved, rather, the relationship between the building and the space around it had subtly altered, as if reality itself had been gently nudged sideways. Fascinating. He paused at the entrance, suddenly aware that he could perceive layers of complex energy patterns surrounding the structure, protective wards disguised as ordinary architectural details. Whoever had created them possessed considerable skill in what humans might call magic. Though Issei instinctively understood it as manipulated dimensional resonance. Before he could knock, the door swung open. You came, Rias said, genuine pleasure warming her voice. I wasn't sure you would. Curiosity got the better of me, Issei replied, stepping across the threshold. The interior defied the building's external appearance, presenting a luxurious Victorian aesthetic with polished wood panels, velvet curtains, and antique furniture. Several students occupied the main room. A petite white-haired girl eating sweets on a sofa, a beautiful dark-haired young woman preparing tea, and a handsome blonde boy who smiled warmly at Issei's entrance. Everyone, Rias announced, this is Issei Hyodo, our potential new member. Potential. Issei raised an eyebrow. The occult research club is quite selective, explained the dark-haired girl, approaching with a tea tray. I'm Akano Himahima, vice president. Pleased to meet you. Her smile contained multitudes, politeness, curiosity, and something darker lurking beneath. Like Rias, Akano radiated supernatural energy, though hers felt distinctly different, a curious dichotomy of opposing forces. Yuto Kiba, the blonde boy introduced himself with a formal bow. His energy signature was distinct, something sharp and martial beneath his courteous exterior. The white-haired girl merely nodded without introducing herself. But Issei sensed something primal and ancient behind her neutral expression. Kaneko isn't much for conversation, Rias explained, gesturing for Issei to sit. But she's essential to our club. Issei took the offered seat, suddenly aware that he was being carefully observed by everyone present. Not with hostility, but with the focused attention of predators SSING something unexpected in their territory. So, he began conversationally, what exactly does the Occult Research Club research? A weighted silence filled the room. The 4 club members exchanged glances before Rias spoke. Officially, we investigate supernatural legends and paranormal phenomena, she said carefully. Unofficially, perhaps we should demonstrate. With that, black bat-like wings unfurled from her back, identical to what Issei had glimpsed in his vision. Similar wings appeared behind Akeno, Kiba, and Kaneko. We are devils, Rias stated simply. This club is a fraud. For my peerage, a family of contracted servants who assist me in my duties as heir to the House of Gremory. Issei didn't react with shock or disbelief. Instead, he tilted his head slightly, examining the dimensional properties of their wings with genuine fascination. Interesting structure, he commented. Those aren't physical appendages, but localized spatial distortions that interface with a separate dimensional plane, correct? Quote, 5 pairs of eyes stared at him in stunned silence. That's not the reaction we typically get, Akeno finally said. Rias recovered first, wings disappearing as she leaned forward. You're not surprised we're devils. Should I be? Issei shrugged. The world is full of extraordinary things hiding in plain sight. Like how this building exists partially in a pocket dimension. Or how the girl you call Kaneko isn't human but some kind of feline spirit being. Kaneko's eyes widened marginally, the most expression he'd seen from her. How could you possibly know that? Rias asked, caution and curiosity warring in her voice. Issei hesitated. Trust didn't come easily to him, not because he was naturally suspicious, but because explaining his recent experiences meant confronting truths he himself didn't fully comprehend. Let's just say I've been experiencing my own supernatural awakening, he finally offered. I came here hoping you might help me understand it. What kind of awakening? Kiba asked, his hand subtly shifting toward what Issei sensed was a concealed weapon. Rather than explain, Issei decided to demonstrate. He reached forward, pinched an invisible seam in the air between them, and gently pulled. Reality parted like curtains, revealing a brief window into another dimension, a forest glade bathed in purple moonlight where gravity flowed sideways. That's impossible, Rias whispered as Issei closed the dimensional window with a casual gesture. Even high-class devils can't create dimensional rifts without elaborate rituals. I didn't create it, Issei corrected. I just revealed what's already there. All dimensions exist simultaneously, separated by boundaries thinner than thought. The words came automatically, knowledge he shouldn't possess flowing from some deeper part of himself. What are you? Akeno asked, all pretense of the polite schoolgirl gone. That's what I've been trying to figure out. Issei ran a hand through his brown hair. Suddenly tired. I've always been different, but these past few months, things have escalated. I manipulate space unconsciously. I know things I've never learned. I dream of stars and void and responsibilities I don't understand. Rias exchanged glances with her peerage before making a decision. You've shown us your truth. It's only fair we fully reveal ours. She proceeded to explain the complex hierarchy of devil society, the ancient war between devils, angels, and fallen angels, and her own position as heir to one of the remaining 72 pillars of the underworld. Devils operate through contracts with humans, she concluded. We grant wishes in exchange for payment, usually in the form of life energy or services, not souls as myths suggest. And you're recruiting? Issei asked. Not exactly. I sense something incredibly powerful within you, Issei. Whatever you are, you're not an ordinary human. She paused, choosing her words carefully. I believe our meeting wasn't coincidence. Forces beyond our understanding may have brought us together. Issei nodded slowly. The cosmic coincidences required for his human incarnation to intersect with supernatural beings so early in his awakening seemed suspiciously convenient. The universe rarely aligns such perfect timing without purpose. So what happens now? He asked. Join us, Rias proposed. Not as a servant, but as an ally. We can help you understand your abilities, and perhaps you can help us with something in return. What would that be? Rias's expression darkened. I'm trapped. In an arrangement I can't escape alone, a political marriage to unite two devil houses. I've sought every legitimate means to break the contract, but time grows short. Issei felt a strange protectiveness surge through him. The idea of Rias being forced into anything against her will disturbed him on a fundamental level. Something within him, something vast and ancient, stirred at the concept of such constraint. "When is this marriage supposed to happen?" he asked. "The formal engagement ceremony is tomorrow night," she replied. "Once completed, it becomes magically binding. And if I were to help you prevent this engagement, what exactly would that involve?" A smile curved Rias's lips, not her usual polite expression, but something fierce and determined. Something appropriately dramatic. "How do you feel about crashing a high society devil function?" For the first time in months, Issei felt a sense of purpose cutting through his confusion. "I believe I could manage that. The underworld didn't resemble the fire and brimstone human conception of hell. Instead, Issei found himself in a realm of breathtaking beauty, purple skies, floating islands, and architecture that defied conventional physics. What fascinated him most was the dimensional composition of the place. The underworld existed as a complete reality adjacent to Earth, connected through carefully maintained pathways. As Rias transported their group through a magic circle, Issei could perceive the intricate spatial mechanisms facilitating their transition. "Impressed?" Rias asked, noticing his wonder. "It's magnificent," he admitted. "Whoever engineered this dimensional interface had profound understanding of spatial dynamics. The original Satans created it millennia ago," she explained as they walked toward a towering palace. "No one fully understands how it works anymore." Issei could have explained it. The knowledge hovered just beyond conscious reach, but they had more immediate concerns. Rias had brought her entire peerage, plus Issei, to the engagement ceremony being held at the ancestral Gremory estate. The plan was simple, if audacious. Rias would invoke an ancient devil Tradit Ion, allowing challenges to arranged marriages, and Kiba would serve as her champion against whatever representative her unwanted fiancé selected. Issei's role was officially that of observer, though Rias had hinted she believed his spatial abilities might prove useful if complications arose. What neither of them had anticipated was how the underworld itself would react to Issei's presence. As they approached the palatial grounds, Issei noticed subtle distortions rippling outward from his footsteps. The very fabric of the underworld seemed to recognize something in him, responding like an instrument to a familiar touch. "Something's happening," Kaneko murmured, her feline senses clearly detecting the disturbance. "It's nothing to worry about," Issei assured them, though he wasn't entirely certain. He focused on suppressing the resonance between his true nature and this dimensional plane. The engagement ceremony had already begun when they entered the grand ballroom. Hundreds of ILs from ancient noble houses turned to stare as Rias strode confidently down the central aisle, her peerage and Issei following behind. At the far end stood a tall, aristocratic man with crimson hair similar to Rias's, her brother. Sears Lucifer, current leader of Devil Society. Beside him was a woman Issei presumed to be Rias's mother, along with a blonde man whose arrogant smirk immediately set Issei's teeth on edge. "What is the meaning of this, Rias?" boomed an imposing older man who could only be Lord Gremory. "You were instructed to prepare for the ceremony, not bring unauthorized guests." "Father," Rias replied with steel in her voice, "I invoke the right of contested claim." A collective gasp rippled through the assembled devils. Sears's expression remained neutral, but Issei detected a flicker of something that might have been approval. "The right of contested claim hasn't been invoked in centuries," Lord Gremory protested. "Nevertheless, it remains valid law," Rias countered. "I refuse this arrangement and demand trial by combat. My champion will face risers to determine the validity of this contract." The blonde man, Riser Phoenix, presumably, laughed mockingly. "This is absurd. No champion you could possibly field would stand against mine." "Then you have nothing to fear," Rias replied coolly. Lord Gremory consulted briefly with Sears before reluctantly nodding. "The ancient laws are clear. If invoked, the right must be honored." He fixed his daughter with a stern gaze. "But understand, Rias, if your champion falls, this marriage will proceed immediately, with no further delays or objections permitted." "I understand," Rias agreed. Riser stepped forward, confidence bordering on contempt evident in every movement. "Very well. I name Ubeluna, my queen, as my champion." A beautiful woman with purple hair stepped forward, power radiating from her in palpable waves. Issei sensed her strength immediately. easily the most powerful member of Riser's peerage. A strategic choice designed to overwhelm whatever champion Rias selected. "I name Yuto Kiba as my champion," Rias announced. Kiba stepped forward, summoning a sword of light as murmurs spread through the crowd. While skilled, the young knight clearly didn't match Yubeluna's raw power. Issei realized this was likely deliberate. Rias was making a statement by choosing honor over expedience. A magical barrier formed around a designated combat area as the two champions prepared to face each other. Issei watched carefully, analyzing the dimensional properties of devil magic with increasing fascination. Their energy manipulation relied on mathematical principles that reminded him of concepts from his dreams: ordered chaos, structured randomness. The battle began explosively, Ubeluna immediately taking to the air and bombarding Kiba with magical attacks. The knight dodged with incredible speed, but the continuous magical barrage left him no opportunity to close distance or his swordsmanship to become effective. After several minutes, it became clear Kiba was fighting a losing battle. His movements slowed as exhaustion set in, while Ubeluna showed no signs of depleting her considerable magical reserves. "He can't win," Akino whispered, concern evident. "He was never meant to," Rias replied, her eyes never leaving the battle. "This is about showing resolve, not victory." Issei glanced at her, suddenly understanding. "You're proving you'd rather lose with dignity than submit without resistance." Precisely. A particularly powerful blast caught Kiba directly, sending him crashing into the barrier. He struggled to rise, determination evident despite his injuries. Ubeluna prepared what was clearly intended as a finishing blow. "Enough," Lord Gremory called. "The outcome is clear. The challenge has been met and failed." Rias's shoulders slumped slightly, though her expression remained defiant. Riser's triumphant smile grew as he stepped forward. "Now, as agreed, we proceed immediately with the binding ceremony," he announced, reaching for Rias's hand. Something ancient and terrible stirred within Issei as he watched this unfold. Not rage exactly, but a fundamental objection to seeing free will constrained, to witnessing arrogance triumph over authenticity. The universe itself seemed to whisper that this outcome was unbalanced, incorrect. Without conscious decision, Issei stepped forward. "I challenge the validity of this entire proceeding," he stated, his voice carrying unexpected resonance that silenced the entire hall. "Who are you to challenge anything here, human?" Riser demanded, though uncertainty flickered in his eyes as he regarded Issei more carefully. "I'm not entirely sure," Issei admitted with disarming honesty. "But I know imbalance when I see it." He turned to address Lord Gremory and Sirzex directly. "The right of contested claim isn't the only ancient law relevant here. There's also the principle of equitable exchange." Sirzex raised an eyebrow, genuine curiosity evident. "You speak of devil law as if born to it. Explain." "No binding contract can exist where one party receives disproportionate benefit without equivalent value exchange," Issei stated, knowledge flowing from somewhere beyond his conscious mind. "This marriage doesn't offer Rias compensation equal to her sacrifice of autonomy. The contract is fundamentally invalid under your own ancient laws." Stunned silence followed his proclamation. Even Rias looked shocked, clearly not having expected this intervention. Lord Gremory recovered first. "While technically correct, the principle of equitable exchange hasn't been invoked in millennia. And you have no standing to invoke it." "I invoke it," came a new voice. Sirzex Lucifer stepped forward, a subtle smile playing at his lips. "As Satan and brother, I have dual standing." Riser's confident demeanor cracked. "This is outrageous. The political alliance between our houses can be achieved through means other than forcing my sister into an unwanted marriage," Sirzex interrupted smoothly. "The human is correct. The contract lacks equitable exchange." As the devils argued legal technicalities, Issei sensed something shift in the dimensional fabric surrounding them. A faint tremor, almost imperceptible, rippled through the underworld. He alone noticed how shadows briefly lengthened, how light momentarily bent at impossible angles. Something was coming. Extending his awareness outward, Issei detected a disturbance in the boundary between dimensions. Whatever approached wasn't devil, angel, or any known supernatural entity. It existed between realities, a predator of the void. The argument about Rias's marriage suddenly seemed insignificant compared to the approaching threat. Issei scanned the ballroom, identifying the structural weak points in reality where a breach was most likely to occur. There, a convergence of ley lines beneath the ornate central chandelier created a dimensional nexus, a natural thin point between worlds. Everyone needs to move away from the center of the room, Issei announced urgently, interrupting the heated debate. How dare you? Riser began, but stopped abruptly as the air above them shimmered and distorted. The chandelier began to oscillate, crystals chiming discordantly as space itself warped around it. Devils instinctively backed away, sensing wrongness beyond their experience. What is that? Rias asked, moving to stand beside Issei. Trouble, he replied grimly. The dimensional breach opened, with a sound like reality tearing, not loud, but fundamentally wrong in ways that made several devils cover their ears in pain. Through the opening emerged a creature that defied comprehension, a shift ing massive angles and surfaces that shouldn't be able to exist in three-dimensional space, trailing tendrils of void stuff that caused whatever they touched to simply cease existing. Void Harbinger, Issei whispered, the name coming from his deepest memories. Devils reacted with admirable speed, magical circles forming as they prepared defensive measures. Searsek stepped forward, power radiating from him that dwarfed everyone else present. But Issei knew conventional power, no matter how vast, wouldn't affect this entity. It existed partially outside normal reality, making it largely immune to energy-based attacks. Your magic won't work, he called out, moving forward. It doesn't fully exist in this dimension. The Harbinger sensed him immediately, its incomprehensible form reorienting toward Issei with predatory focus. Recognition emanated from it, not consciousness as living beings understood it, but an ancient hunger awakening at the presence of something it had evolved specifically to consume. It recognized what Issei truly was, even if he himself didn't fully remember. As the creature lunged toward him, Issei acted on instinct. He raised his hands, fingers moving in patterns that felt as natural as breathing, though he'd never consciously performed them before. The space around the Harbinger compressed, then expanded asymmetrically, creating dimensional shear foe. RCES that affected even an entity of its nature. The creature screeched in a frequency that existed primarily in ultraviolet ranges, imperceptible to ordinary senses but painfully clear to Issei's awakening awareness. It recoiled momentarily before launching a more determined attack, void tendrils whipping toward him from multiple vectors simultaneously. Issei sidestepped with impossible grace, manipulating his position in space rather than physically moving. To observers, he appeared to blur between locations, avoiding lethal contact by millimeters. What is he? He heard someone whisper behind him. The Harbinger grew more frenzied, abandoning subtlety for overwhelming force. It expanded, filling more of the ballroom with its impossible geometry, forcing devils to retreat further as reality itself became unstable around its form. Issei realized he couldn't defeat it with defensive tactics. Drawing a deep breath, he reached deep within himself, past his human identity to the cosmic awareness that had been gradually reawakening. Power flooded through him, not magic as devils understood it, but something more fundamental. The ability to define, manipulate, and enforce the rules of space itself. His eyes glowed with starlight as he raised both hands and spoke a single word in a language that predated creation. The sound resonated at frequencies that caused the very air to shimmer. The dimensional structure of the underworld temporarily recognizing a higher authority than even its creators. Around the Harbinger, space folded inward from 12 directions simultaneously, reading a dimensional compression matrix that even a void entity couldn't escape. Caught in a geometrically perfect prison of compressed space-time, the creature thrashed futilely as Issei closed his hands into fists. Completing the containment, with a sound like vacuum collapsing, the Harbinger imploded into a singularity the size of a marble, which Issei promptly encased in multiple layers of dimensional locks before pocketing it. Silence reigned in the aftermath. Hundreds of devils, including the leaders of their society, stared at Issei with expressions ranging from awed terror to calculating interest. Rias stepped forward first, eyes wide. Issei, what was that thing? And what did you do to it? A dimensional predator, he answered, suddenly exhausted as the cosmic power receded, leaving him feeling hollowed out. They hunt between realities, consuming the boundaries that separate dimensions. As for what I did, he shrugged. Spatial manipulation. I created a pocket dim Engine with inverted properties that neutralized its extra-dimensional aspects. The casual way he described what should have been impossible didn't escape anyone's notice. Sears approached slowly, power held carefully in check. "You're no ordinary human," he stated with absolute certainty. "No," Issei agreed. "I don't think I am." "What are you, then?" Issei considered the question, fragile. Ents of his cosmic dreams providing pieces of an answer he wasn't yet ready to fully embrace. "I'm still figuring that out," he finally replied. "But I think I might be something very old that's trying to remember itself." Sears studied him intently before coming to a decision. "Whatever you are, you've done Devil Society a service today. That creature could have caused incalculable damage." He turned to the assembled nobles. "This engagement ceremony is suspended indefinitely while we investigate this incident and reassess the contract under the principle of equitable exchange." Rias began to protest but fell silent at a look from the Satan. The immediate crisis averted, attention returned to Issei with new intensity. Rias moved to his side, concern evident. "Are you all right? You look pale." "Just tired," he assured her. "Using abilities I don't fully understand takes a toll." She hesitated, then asked the question clearly foremost in her mind. "Did you know this would happen? Is that why you came with us today?" "No," Issei answered honestly. "I came because you asked for help. The Harbinger's appearance was coincidence, or perhaps not." He frowned, considering. Quote, "It might have sensed me awakening and followed the resonance here. If so, I've inadvertently put you all in danger." "You also protected us," Rias pointed out. "Without you, I don't know if even my brother could have stopped that thing." Before Issei could respond, his vision blurred. The exertion of channeling cosmic power through his human form had depleted him more severely than he'd realized. As consciousness faded, he heard Rias calling his name with alarm. His last thought before darkness claimed him was that the boundaries were indeed growing thin, just as his dream self had warned. The appearance of a void harbinger this close to Earth couldn't be coincidence. Something was coming. Something far worse than a single-dimensional predator. And somehow, he was central to whatever cosmic drama was unfolding. Issei woke in an unfamiliar bedroom of palatial proportions. Crimson curtains shrouded a massive four-poster bed, while ornate furnishings suggested he remained in the underworld. Finally awake, "I see." He turned to find Rias seated nearby, watching him with a complex mixture of concern, curiosity, and something warmer he couldn't quite identify. "How long was I unconscious?" he asked, sitting up cautiously. "Nearly 2 days," she answered. "You gave us quite a scare." 2 days. Issei absorbed this information, noting that his internal clock confirmed her statement. 48 hours and 17 minutes had passed since his collapse. Another piece of knowledge he shouldn't possess but somehow did. "What happened after I passed out?" "Chaos, initially," Rias admitted. "Then investigation. Every devil scholar and researcher has been analyzing what you did and theorizing about that creature." She leaned forward. "My brother believes it was drawn specifically to you. He thinks you're something unprecedented." "And what do you think?" Issei asked quietly. Rias considered him, her usually guarded expression open for once. "I think you're exactly who I needed to find. Exactly when I needed to find you." She smiled slightly. "Whether that's cosmic coincidence or fate, I'm grateful." A comfortable silence fell between them, broken when Issei finally addressed the matter that had brought them to the underworld in the first place. "Your engagement, officially suspended," she confirmed with evident satisfaction. The principle of equitable exchange provided legal grounds. And after the Harbinger incident, no one was particularly focused on marriage politics. Her expression sobered. "But that's temporary. Eventually, the political pressures will resume. Then we'll face them when they do," Issei said with quiet confidence. Rias raised an eyebrow at his use of "we," but didn't comment on it directly. "My brother wants to speak with you when you're recovered. The entire devil leadership does, actually. I imagine they have questions." "Hundreds," she confirmed. "Starting with what exactly you are." Issei sighed, pushing back covers to swing his legs over the edge of the bed. "I wish I could give them clear answers. The truth is, I'm remembering in fragments." "Remembering what, exactly?" He met her gaze directly. "Everything. What I am. Why I chose to become human. What I'm meant to protect." He gestured toward the window, beyond which lay the purple sky of the underworld. That creature was just the beginning. More will come. The boundaries between dimensions weaken. Why are they weakening? Rias asked. I think, because I'm awakening. The admission cost him, acknowledging his central role in whatever cosmic danger approached. My presence creates resonance patterns across realities. The more my true nature emerges, the more the old barriers respond to me rather than their original programming. Rias processed this with remarkable composure. And what is your true nature, Issei Hyodo? The name, his human name, felt simultaneously true and false. He was Issei, yes, but he was also something far more ancient. I believe I'm the primordial sage of space, he said finally, giving voice to the knowledge that had been growing within him. A cosmic entity that predates this universe, responsible for maintaining the boundaries between realities. Quote, rather than disbelief, Rias's expression showed thoughtful consideration. That would explain your spatial manipulation abilities and why that creature seemed to recognize you. Void harbingers are natural enemies of boundary keepers, Issei confirmed, the knowledge surfacing like bubbles from deep water. They consume the divisions between realities, allowing dimensions to bleed into each other. Which would be catastrophic, Rias concluded. Beyond catastrophic. Imagine every possible and impossible reality suddenly occupying the same space, Sakao laws from one dimension contradicting another, conceptual frameworks collapsing, existence itself becoming nonsensical. A knock at the door interrupted their conversation. Akano entered, carrying a tray with food and drink. You're awake, she observed with evident relief. Good. Searsek-sama requests your presence when you feel able. Issei nodded. I'll be ready shortly. After Akano departed, Rias rose to allow him privacy to dress. At the doorway, she paused. Whatever you are, Issei Hyodo, I'm glad you chose to attend Kuo Academy. Her smile contained warmth beyond political alliance or supernatural interest. And I'm especially glad you decided to join my club. After she left, Issei stood at the window, gazing out at the underworld's alien landscape. Fragments of High's cosmic memory continued surfacing. Eons of solitude observing universes from beyond, the weariness of eternal detachment, his decision to experience reality from within by temporarily becoming human. He hadn't anticipated the awakening would begin so soon, or that it would draw dimensional predators to this reality. But perhaps that was inevitable. Perhaps that was even why he had incarnated her. Specifically, because this dimension was already weakening, already vulnerable. Whatever the truth, one thing was becoming increasingly clear. Issei Hyodo might have started as a human identity, a temporary experience for a cosmic entity, but he found himself genuinely caring about this world and its inhabitants. Particularly a certain crimson-haired devil who had recognized something special in him before he'd recognized it himself. The boundaries between dimensions might be growing thin, but new connections were forming to replace them, connections of friendship, loyalty, and perhaps song. Anything deeper that even a primordial sage had never experienced in countless eons of existence. Perhaps that, more than anything else, was worth protecting. Chapter 1 End Chapter 2, Dimensional Fractures. News traveled with unnatural speed through supernatural circles. Within days of the incident at the Gremory estate, every major faction knew some version of what had transpired, though accounts varied wildly depending on the source. Devils spoke of a human who commanded space itself. Angels whispered of a potential new god-class entity. Yokai passed hushed rumors of a boundary keeper returned from myth. Issei Hyodo, meanwhile, ate breakfast with his ostensibly normal parents, who remained blissfully unaware that their son had recently imprisoned an extra-dimensional predator and thrown devil politics into chaos. You've been distracted lately, his mother observed, passing him a bowl of rice. Everything all right at school? Issei accepted the bowl with a nod. Just busy with club activities. A masterful understatement. Since returning from the underworld 3 days ago, he'd undergone intensive questioning from devil researchers, angelic observers, and even a representative from the Norse pantheon, all while attempting to maintain his cover as an ordinary high school student. That reminds me, his father interjected, looking up from his newspaper. The school called yesterday about your class trip to Kyoto next week. We need to sign the permission forms. Right, Issei mumbled through a mouthful of food. The Kyoto trip had completely slipped his mind, which was saying something for a being gradually recalling cosmic omniscience. Normal human concerns felt increasingly distant as more of his true nature resurfaced daily. This morning, he'd awakened remembering the birth of quasars. After breakfast, Issei walked to school along his usual route, though nothing about the experience felt usual anymore. With each step, he perceived layers of reality invisible to human senses, the geometric perfection of spatial dimensions, the quantum fluctuations of probability, the thin membranes separating parallel worlds that occasionally brushed against each other like soap bubbles in a breeze. Beautiful, terrifying, fragile. He paused at an ordinary street corner, noticing how a flowering cherry tree created a minute-dimensional pocket around itself, a natural phenomenon he now recognized as common to living things. All life generated small distortions in space-time simply by existing. You see it too, don't you? The voice startled him from his contemplation. A slender woman with silver-gray hair stood nearby, dressed in a formal suit that seemed at odds with her youthful appearance. Sharp teal eyes studied him with analytical precision. See what? Issei countered carefully. The folded space around the cherry blossoms. She stepped closer, her accent faintly Scandinavian. Most humans perceive only three-dimensional shadows of reality. But observing the actual dimensional variances. Issei maintained his neutral expression while internally cycling through possible responses. This woman was clearly supernatural, her own dimensional signature revealed complex magical protections and power suppression spells, but he couldn't immediately identify her specific nature. Who are you? He asked directly. Rossweisse. She offered a crisp, professional bow. Starting today, I'm a teacher at Kuo Academy. Norse Studies and Advanced Mathematics. Norse. That explained the unique magical signature, Valkyrie-derived power structures with distinct Asgardian inflections. Issei Hyodo, he replied with a more casual bow. I know. Her lips curved in a slight smile that didn't reach her analytical eyes. You've become quite the topic of discussion in certain circles. Before he could respond, she checked her watch, an intricate device whose internal mechanisms Issei instinctively recognized as partially existing in a pocket dimension. We should continue walking if you don't want to be late, she observed, setting a brisk pace that Issei matched reflexively. You're not very subtle for a supernatural observer, he noted. They'd walked half a block in silence. Rossweisse shrugged. Subtlety seemed inefficient given the circumstances. Various factions have been debating how to approach you since the underworld incident. Odin-sama decided direct contact was preferable to endless speculation. Odin sent you. Why? Because unprecedented dimensional anomalies have been occurring worldwide since your awakening. She spoke matter-of-factly, as if discussing weather patterns rather than cosmic disturbances. The Allfather believes you might be the cause, the solution, or both. Issei absorbed this information silently. The timing aligned with his own experiences. His abilities had been manifesting with increasing frequency and power over the past months, accelerating dramatically after the Harbinger encounter. And your role is observer, initially, teacher, officially. Rossweisse's tone remained professional. I specialized in spatial temporal mechanics during my Valkyrie training. If these anomalies continue escalating, my expertise may prove useful. They reached the school gates, where Rias waited with poorly concealed curiosity. Her eyes narrowed slightly at the sight of Rossweisse walking alongside Issei. Good morning. Rias greeted them, her polite smile masking obvious questions. I wasn't aware you two had met. Just this morning, Issei explained. Apparently Rossweisse-sensei will be joining the faculty. Indeed, Rossweisse confirmed with formal politeness. I look forward to contributing to Kuo Academy's educational excellence. The subtle tension between the two women didn't escape Issei's notice. Rias, as a devil, would naturally be wary of Asgardian involvement in her territory, while Rossweisse seemed to be assessing Rias's connection to Issei with professional interest. I should report to the administrative office, Rossweisse announced, checking her watch again. Issei-kun, I'm sure we'll have opportunity for further discussion. With a perfunctory nod to Rias, she departed. Once she was out of earshot, Rias turned to Issei with raised eyebrows. A Valkyrie, here. Apparently Odin is concerned about dimensional anomalies, Issei explained. As they walked toward the main building. She didn't say it directly, but I think Norse mythology might have some historical knowledge about entities like me. It's not just the Norse, Rias replied thoughtfully. My brother mentioned that several ancient archives have been reopened, searching for references to boundary keepers or spatial sages. The Devil's oldest records contain fragments of primordial entities that existed before the biblical god. Issei nodded slowly. This aligned with his gradually returning memories, brief flashes of witnessing the birth of this universe's pantheons. Observing from a perspective beyond comprehension as divine beings emerged from cosmic consciousness. How are you handling it? Rias asked more gently, their pace slowing as they approached the school entrance. The awakening, I mean. It can't be easy suddenly remembering your, well, whatever you actually are. The question caught him off guard, not because it was unexpected, but because so few had bothered to ask about his personal experience amid their fascination with his abilities. It's disorienting, he admitted. Like watching two different movies simultaneously, my human life and cosmic memories overlapping but not quite matching up. Sometimes I'll be doing something completely ordinary, like brushing my teeth, and suddenly remember watching galaxies form. Rias touched his arm lightly, her expression softening. If you ever need someone to talk to who isn't trying to study or recruit you, I'm here. The simple offer moved him. For all her devil politics and noble responsibilities, Rias possessed genuine compassion that transcended faction interests. Thank you, he said simply. The school bell chimed, interrupting the moment. As they parted ways for their respective classes, Issei felt a curious warmth that had nothing to do with cosmic awareness and everything to do with human connection. Norse studies quickly became the most popular elective at Kuo-H Academy, a development that had less to do with sudden student interest in Scandinavian mythology and more to do with the striking new teacher who conducted the class with military precision and unexpected passion. Seated in the back row, Issei observed Rossweisse's teaching methodology with growing fascination. She approached mythology not as quaint stories but as encoded historical documents, analyzing linguistic patterns and symbolic systems with mathematical rigor. The Bifrost Bridge, she explained, gesturing to a complex diagram on the whiteboard, represents one of the earliest documented dimensional transit systems. Nordic skalds described it as a rainbow bridge, but surviving runic equations suggest it functioned more like an Einstein-Rosen bridge with stability modifications. Most students appeared lost by this explanation, but Issei found himself nodding along. The mathematical symbols Rossweisse had written matched patterns he'd observed in natural dimensional boundaries. Sensei, ventured a brave student. What does this have to do with mythology? Rossweisse smiled thinly. Mythology is how pre-scientific cultures documented phenomena they couldn't explain. Their observations were often accurate, even if their interpretations were limited by contemporary understanding. She tapped the diagram meaningfully. Modern physics is only now rediscovering principles that ancient cultures encoded in their spiritual narratives. When class ended, Issei remained seated while other students filed out. Rossweisse organized her materials with methodical precision, seemingly unsurprised when he approached her desk. Your lecture was fascinating, he began. Especially the runecrafting equations for dimensional stabilization. Most students found it incomprehensible, she observed, not looking up from her papers. Most students haven't seen dimensional boundaries firsthand. This earned him a direct look. No, they haven't. She hesitated before asking, how much do you remember now? About what you are. Fragments, Issei admitted. Enough to recognize the principles you described, but not enough to fully reconstruct my purpose or limitations. Rossweisse nodded, her analytical expression softening slightly. That must be frustrating for a being of your nature. It is, he acknowledged, surprised by her perception. Like trying to solve an equation with most variables missing. Perhaps we could help each other, she suggested, tucking a strand of silver hair behind her ear, a rare gesture of uncertainty from her otherwise composed demeanor. I've spent centuries studying dimensional mechanics, and you, well, you apparently embody them. What did you have in mind? An exchange of perspectives. She lowered her voice despite the empty classroom. I can share what Norse records reveal about cosmic entities and dimensional structures. In return, you might help clarify theories I've been developing about spatial manipulation. Issei considered her proposal. Beyond the obvious strategic advantage of learning what the Norse knew about beings like himself, he found himself genuinely curious about Rossweisse's understanding. Her approach to dimensional theory showed unusual insight for a non-cosmic entity. I'd like that, he decided. When the faculty preparation room should be empty after school, she suggested. We could meet there. A knock at the classroom door interrupted them. Rias stood in the doorway, her expression carefully neutral. Pardon the interruption, she said, her politeness masking evident curiosity. Issei, we have club activities to discuss. Rossweisse straightened, resuming her professional demeanor. Of course, we can continue our academic discussion another time, Hyodo-kun. As Issei joined Rias in the hallway, he noted the subtle territorial tension between the two women, not hostile, but distinctly aware of each other's supernatural significance. Making friends with the Valkyrie? Rias inquired as they walked toward the Occult Research Club building. She has interesting perspectives on dimensional theory, Issei replied neutrally. I'm sure she does. Rias's tone remained light, though her eyes betrayed more complex emotions. Just remember that every supernatural faction is currently trying to establish influence with you. The Norse are no exception. Including devils? He asked quietly. Rias stopped walking, turning to face him directly. I won't pretend there aren't those in Devil Society who see you as a potential asset or threat. But that's not why she hesitated. Then continued more carefully. My interest predates knowing what you are, Issei. I approached you because I sensed something special, not because of political calculations. The sincerity in her voice matched what Issei could perceive of her emotional state, a complex blend of pride, concern, and something deeper she wasn't fully acknowledging even to herself. I know, he assured her. And I appreciate that more than I can express. Something in his tone made her blush slightly before she resumed walking. Anyway, we actually do have important club matters to discuss. He student council president has questions about recent spatial anomalies on school grounds. Sona Citri, Issei recalled. Another devil heiress, and one of the most analytical minds in our generation, Rias confirmed. She's been documenting fluctuations in the dimensional barrier surrounding Kuo since your confrontation with the Harbinger. This information concerned Issei. If detectable, changes were occurring in local dimensional stability. His awakening might be accelerating faster than he'd realized. I should examine these fluctuations, he decided. If my presence is destabilizing local reality, we need to implement countermeasures. Rias nodded. That's why Sona requested this meeting. She's already initiated basic containment protocols, but they're proving insufficient. When they reached the old schoolhouse, they found not only the Occult Research Club members waiting but also Sona Citri and several members of her student council. The typically composed Sona looked uncharacteristically concerned. Dark circles beneath her violet eyes suggesting recent sleepless nights. Hyodo-kun, she greeted him formally. Thank you for coming. Kaichu has been monitoring some concerning developments. Rias explained, taking her seat behind the ornate desk. Sona adjusted her glasses, activating a magical projection that displayed a complex map of Kuo Academy's GRO. NDS overlaid with mathematical formulas and energy readings. For the past week, I've been tracking unusual spatial distortions throughout the school, she explained. Initially, they appeared random and minor, small fluctuations in the barrier separating human and supernatural dimensions. However, they've been increasing in both frequency and magnitude. The projection shifted to show time-lapse data, revealing an unmistakable pattern of escalation. Yesterday, a first-year student nearly walked into a dimensional pocket that spontaneously formed in the eastern courtyard, Sona continued. Quote, my vice president intercepted her just in time. When we examined the anomaly, we found it contained a spatial vacuum that would have completely removed anything entering it from our dimension. Issei studied the data with growing concern. The pattern matched his own internal experiences, his powers manifesting with increasing frequency and strength, often unconsciously. These aren't random, he concluded. They're emanating from me, like ripples from a stone dropped in water. My presence is causing dimensional resonance patterns that create these pockets. Can you control them? Sona asked directly. Not entirely, not yet. Issei admitted. I'm still remembering how my abilities function. It's like relearning muscle memory, except the muscles control fundamental aspects of reality. Sona exchanged glances with Rias before asking her next question. Is there a danger of these anomalies becoming large enough to threaten the entire school? Or beyond? The question hung heavily in the air. Issei considered it carefully, consulting his fragmentary cosmic knowledge. Not immediately, he finally answered. But eventually, yes. As more of my true nature awakens, the dimensional disturbances will intensify unless I implement proper containment. Can you teach us how to create such containment? Sona pressed. Issei shook his head slowly. The principles operate on Mathematica. Systems beyond current supernatural understanding. Even explaining them would require concepts your languages don't contain. Then what do you suggest? Rias asked, concern evident in her voice. Issei raised his hand, fingers spreading as he sensitized himself to the dimensional currents flowing through the school grounds. He could feel the ripples now, subtle distortions emanating from his own existence, creating interference patterns in the fabric of local space-time. With careful concentration, he began weaving his fingers in complex patterns, manipulating dimensional strings visible only to him. The air around his hands shimmered as he constructed an elaborate lattice of spatial constraints. I can create a stabilization field, he explained as he worked. A buffer zone that absorbs RBS and redirects the resonance patterns before they can form dangerous pockets. The mathematical projection Sona had created began changing in real time, showing the distortion patterns reorganizing into more harmonious configurations. Everyone watched in fascination as Issei essentially rewrote local spatial laws through seemingly simple hand gestures. When he finished, a brief flash of silver light pulsed outward. Invisible to normal human perception but clearly noticeable to the supernatural beings present. There, he said, lowering his hands. That should prevent further dangerous anomalies within school grounds. Sona studied her readings with obvious amazement. The distortion patterns have completely reorganized. How did you? She stopped herself, shaking her head. Never mind. I doubt I'd understand the explanation. It's temporary, Issei cautioned. As my awakening progresses, we'll need stronger measures. But this should suffice for now. The meeting continued with discussion of practical matters, establishing monitoring protocols, creating contingency plans, determining which staff members should be informed of potential dangers. Throughout, Issei noticed Sona, watching him with calculated interest that went beyond professional concern. After the student council members departed, Rias turned to Issei with a troubled expression. The Kyoto trip is next week, she reminded him. If these spatial disturbances follow you, they will, he confirmed. My presence affects local dimensional stability wherever I go. Then perhaps you shouldn't attend the trip, Akano suggested practically. Kyoto has significant spiritual importance in Japanese mythology. Dimensional disruptions there could have unpredictable consequences. Issei considered this, consulting his gradually expanding cosmic awareness. Actually, I think I should definitely go to Kyoto. Why? Rias asked, surprised. Because Kyoto sits at a natural dimensional nexus point, a place where boundaries between worlds are naturally thinner. If I'm there physically, I can establish more direct control over any anomalies that form. He paused, remembering something important. Also, Kyoto is home to one of the most powerful ley line convergences in Japan. The energy there might help stabilize my awakening process. Kyoto is also yokai territory, Rias pointed out. Specifically, it's under the protection of Yusaka, the nine-tailed fox leader. Supernatural incidents in her domain will draw her attention. Good, Issei decided. If she's as powerful as legends suggest, her assistance could prove valuable if problems arise. Rias studied him thoughtfully. You're thinking like a strategist, not a high school student. I suppose I am, Issei acknowledged with a small smile. Cosmic perspective changes one's priorities. Just don't forget your human perspective entirely, she advised softly. It might prove equally valuable. The gentle reminder touched something deep within him, a part that feared losing his human connections as his cosmic nature resurfaced. Despite remembering eons of existence, his time as Issei Hyodo remained uniquely precious precisely because of its limitations and connections. I won't, he promised. After all, I chose humanity for a reason, even if I don't fully remember what it was yet. The faculty preparation room hummed. With quiet mechanical efficiency as Rossweisse spread ancient texts across a table otherwise occupied by modern laptops and half-graded exams. These are copies of the original Etic manuscripts, she explained, carefully unfolding fragile parchment covered in runic inscriptions. Not the poetic versions humans eventually recorded, but the technical documents Odin commissioned after his encounters with entities beyond Yggdrasil. Issei examined the runes with growing fascination. Though he'd never studied Norse writing systems, he found he could understand the symbols perfectly, not through linguistic knowledge but through recognition of the dimensional principles they encoded. These aren't just letters, he observed, tracing a pattern without touching the delicate manuscript. They're mathematical formulas describing higher dimensional operations. Rossweisse nodded, a spark of excitement breaking through her professional demeanor. Exactly. Norse runes weren't merely an alphabet, but a system for manipulating reality through dimensional mathematics. Each symbol represents both sound and cosmic function. Like this sequence, Issei indicated a particular arrangement. It's describing quantum entanglement across dimensional boundaries. You can read them. Rossweisse leaned closer, silver hair falling forward as she studied him with renewed interest. Not read exactly, more like recognize. The principles are familiar to my other self. He struggled to articulate the strange dual consciousness he experienced, human cognition overlaid with cosmic understanding. Rossweisse considered this thoughtfully. The manuscripts mention beings called Ginnungagap guardians, entities that existed in the primordial void before creation, maintaining boundaries between conceptual realms. Odin encountered one during his 9-day ordeal hanging from Yggdrasil. What did this guardian do? Issei asked, curious whether these Norse records might fill gaps in his own fragmented memories. According to Odin's account, it showed him the structure of reality, how dimensions intersect, how time flows differently across realms, how space itself is merely a consensus illusion. She traced a complex runic pattern. This section describes techniques the Guardian demonstrated for folding space between points, similar to what you did during the Underworld incident. Issei absorbed this information, comparing it against his partial recollections. The description matched his emerging understanding of his true nature, a primordial entity whose purpose involved maintaining cosmic architecture. Does it mention why these guardians exist? He asked. Their purpose or origin? Rossweisse hesitated. The texts are ambiguous on that point. Some passages suggest they emerged naturally from the primordial chaos as aspects of cosmic balance. Others imply they were created specifically to prevent something called the unraveling. The unraveling, Issei repeated, the PHR, Ace sending an instinctive chill through him. Though he couldn't consciously recall its meaning, something deep within his cosmic awareness recognized the term with profound dread. Rossweisse watched his reaction closely. Does that term mean something to you? Before he could respond, the air between them shimmered, distorting like heat waves above hot pavement. Both reacted instantly, Rossweisse summoning a complex magical circle while Issei raised his hand to stabilize the sudden dimensional fluctuation. That shouldn't be happening, he muttered, concerned. The containment field I created should prevent spontaneous anomalies. Quote, unless something is actively disrupting it, Rossweisse suggested, her combat training evident in her precise movements and alert posture. The distortion expanded despite Issei's attempts to suppress it, forming a small rift that hung in the air between them like a tear in reality. Through it, they glimpsed another place, a crystalline landscape of impose. Cybele geometry where light behaved according to alien physics. Dimensional breach, Rossweisse identified professionally. But unlike any I've seen before. The magical signature isn't devil, angel, or any known pantheon. Issei studied the rift with growing concern. Its edges pulsed with familiar energy, the same void-like quality he'd sensed from the Harbinger in the underworld. We need to close it before something comes through, he decided, fingers already weaving complex patterns to seal the breach. But before he could complete the necessary spatial manipulations, something reached Rough the rift. Not a physical appendage but a tendril of pure conceptual wrongness that bypassed conventional space to directly probe their dimensional location. Rossweisse gasped, her magical defense flaring as the probe brushed against them. It's searching for something. For me, Issei realized grimly. It's sensing my awakening energy signature. The tendril recoiled from Rossweisse's fences before reorienting toward Issei with unmistakable purpose. As it approached him, images flashed through his mind, vast geometries beyond human comprehension, entities that existed simultaneously across multiple incompatible realities. A hunger that consumed not matter or energy but the boundaries between worlds. With sudden clarity, Issei understood what was happening. The stabilization phi LD he'd created around the school hadn't failed. It had acted as a beacon, signaling his presence to whatever lurked between dimensions. Moving with decisive precision, he thrust his hand directly into the rift. Fingers spread wide as he channeled cosmic authority through his human form. The sensation was excruciating, like plunging his arm into superheated plasma, but he maintained focus, imposing spatial laws upon the chaotic energies of the breach. Rossweisse, he commanded through gritted teeth, reinforce the standard dimensional barriers. Norse runecraft, third progression matrix. To her credit, the Valkyrie didn't waste time asking questions. Her hands moved in practiced motions as she chanted in ancient Norse, summoning layers of runic shields that surrounded the anomaly. Between Issei's direct spatial manipulation and Rossweisse's supportive runecraft, the rift gradually collapsed, shrinking until it vanished with a sound like air rushing to fill a vacuum. Silence fell over the faculty room. Issei examined his hand, physically unharmed but tingling with residual energy from direct contact with extra-dimensional forces. That was, Rossweisse began. A probe, Issei finished grimly. Something is actively searching for me across dimensional boundaries. The harbingers your devil friends mentioned. Something controlling them, I think. He frowned, trying to organize fragmentary cosmic memories. The harbingers are more like antibodies or scout drones, extensions of a greater consciousness that exists between realities. Rossweisse studied him with new intensity. You recognized it, not consciously, he admitted. But at some level, yes. Whatever sent that probe is ancient, possibly as ancient as I am. The Valkyrie was silent for a moment. Pros. SSING this information with military efficiency. We should inform Odin-sama and the Devil leadership immediately. If these incursions are becoming more directed rather than random, all supernatural factions need to prepare. Issei nodded in agreement, though privately he doubted conventional supernatural defenses would prove effective against what was coming. The brief contact had revealed an adversary that operated on principles beyond even magical understanding. There's something else we should discuss, he said, changing topics abruptly. The school trip to Kyoto next week. Rossweisse raised an eyebrow. What about it? I'm attending, and given what just happened, I think having a combat-trained Valkyrie as a chaperone would be prudent. A slight smile curved her lips. As it happens, I've already volunteered for that duty. Odin-sama suggested my presence might be useful given Kyoto's significance as a dimensional nexus point. He's well informed, Issei observed. The ALL father rarely misses important details, she agreed. Though his interests sometimes seem eccentrically focused. The way she said this suggested personal experience with Odin's peculiarities, a glimpse of the woman behind the professional facade. For a brief moment, Issei saw not just the Valkyrie warrior or mathematical scholar, but someone with her own complex history and personality. Thank you for sharing these manuscripts, he said, gesturing to the ancient texts still spread across the table. They've helped clarify some aspects of my nature, even if many questions remain. Rossweisse began carefully returning the documents to their protective cases. Knowledge should be shared with those who can use it properly. Few beings could understand these principles, even most Asgardians find them incomprehensible. Yet you understand them, Issei observed. A hint of pride colored her response. I've dedicated centuries to studying dimensional mechanics while most Valkyries used solely on combat training or serving in Valhalla. Something like frustration briefly crossed her features. Academic pursuits aren't highly valued in warrior cultures. Their loss, Issei commented. Your understanding of runecrafting matrices just helped contain a dimensional breach that could have expanded exponentially. The compliment brought a faint blush to her cheeks, quickly suppressed behind professional composure. We should establish protocols for future incidents. If these probes continue, having standardized response procedures would improve efficiency. Issei nodded, appreciating her practical approach. Agreed. Perhaps we could develop a modified version of Norse containment runes that interfaces with my spatial manipulation abilities. A hybrid system, Rossweisse considered, eyes brightening with intellectual interest. Combining runic mathematics with direct cosmic authority, the theoretical applications are fascinating. As they began discussing technical details, Issei found himself enjoying the exchange on multiple levels. Beyond the practical importance of developing better defenses, there was something refreshing about Rossweisse's analytical approach. Her mind navigated complex dimensional concepts with unusual clarity for a non-cosmic being. Different from Rias's intuitive understanding, Rossweisse approached reality as a mathematician, finding beauty in the precise formulas underlying existence. The contrast was intriguing, offering Issei distinct perspectives on his awakening nature. By the time they finished their preliminary designs for enhanced containment runes, evening had fallen outside the faculty room windows. Rossweisse checked her watch with a start. "I hadn't realized how late it's gotten," she observed, efficiently gathering her materials. "We should continue this discussion another time." As they prepared to leave, Issei felt a subtle dimensional shift. Nothing dangerous, but a distinct ripple in local space-time that caught his attention. He paused, extending his awareness to identify its source. "Something wrong?" Rossweisse asked, instantly alert. "Not wrong exactly," he replied thoughtfully. "But someone's watching us. Has been for a while, actually." Without waiting for her response, he turned toward an apparently empty corner of the room and spoke directly to the air. "You might as well show yourself. Hiding doesn't work particularly well around beings who can perceive dimensional variances." A moment of silence followed before the empty space shimmered, revealing a small figure with I see Lolita styling and expressionless eyes that contained infinite depth. "Ophis," Issei greeted the dragon god, recognizing her instantly despite never having met her in his human form. Something in his cosmic awareness identified her fundamental nature, the infinite dragon god, embodiment of nothingness and infinity. Rossweisse tensed visibly, magical energy gathering around her hands. "Ouroboros dragon," she whispered, clearly recognizing the immense danger the small-formed entity represented. Ophis tilted her head slightly, studying Issei with unblinking eyes. "Boundary keeper," she replied in a monotone voice that somehow conveyed both childlike simplicity and unfathomable age. "You were waking up." "Partially," Issei acknowledged. "Why were you watching us?" "Curious," she answered simply. "You feel like home." The statement held profound meaning that Issei instinctively understood. As primordial beings who predated conventional reality, both he and Ophis existed fundamentally outside normal dimensional constraints. They recognized in each other something rarely encountered, entities that remembered the void before creation. "Why reveal yourself now?" he asked. Ophis pointed toward the spot where the dimensional rift had appeared. "Danger coming. Old enemy returns. Boundaries thin." Her fragmented speech nonetheless conveyed clear warning, confirmation of Issei's growing concerns about whatever force was probing for him across dimensions. "You know what's coming," he stated rather than asked. Ophis nodded once. "Unraveling begins. Great Red will not help. I cannot stop it." Her infinite gaze fixed on him with sudden intensity. "But you were made to prevent it." The confirmation sent ripples of recognition through Issei's cosmic awareness, fragments of purpose and identity crystallizing into clearer understanding. The unraveling that Rossweisse's manuscripts mentioned wasn't just a Norse concept but a fundamental cosmic threat, one specifically countered by beings of his nature. "I don't remember everything yet," he admitted to Ophis. "My awakening is incomplete. Remember faster," she advised with childlike directness. "Or all ends." With that cryptic warning, Ophis simply ceased to exist in their dimensional location, not teleporting away but choosing to occupy a slightly different phase of reality, invisible to conventional perception. Rossweisse exhaled shakily once the dragon god's presence completely vanished. That was Ophis, the infinite dragon god, just casually appearing in a school faculty room. Primordial entities don't always understand conventional social boundaries, Issei explained, though he found himself smiling slightly at her justified astonishment. "What did she mean about you feeling like home?" Rossweisse asked, her analytical mind already processing the encounter for valuable information. Issei considered how to explain concepts that human language struggled to express. Beings like Ophis and myself. We remember the primordial void that preceded conventional reality. We recognize in each other something familiar, consciousness that existed before the universe had fully formed. She seemed concerned, Rossweisse observed. I've never heard of Ophis showing concern about anything except reclaiming the dimensional gap from Great Red. Which makes her warning all the more significant, Issei agreed grimly. If something worries a being of Ophis's nature, it represents a truly fundamental threat. Rossweisse gathered her belongings with renewed purpose. I need to report this to Odin-sama immediately. A direct warning from Ouroboros dragon changes our assessment of the situation considerably. As they finally left the faculty room, the sky outside had darkened completely. Campus. Lamps cast pools of light along pathways where a few students still lingered after club activities. The Kyoto trip seems increasingly significant, Rossweisse noted as they walked. If dimensional boundaries are weakening globally, a nexus point like Kyoto might experience effects first, or offer unique opportunities for stabilization, Issei countered. Natural power convergences sometimes function as dimensional anchors during cosmic disturbances. Rossweisse gave him a sideways glance. You're remembering more, aren't you? Speaking with greater certainty about cosmic principles. Issei nodded slowly. The encounter with Ophis triggered something. Primordial recognizing primordial, perhaps. He paused, considering. It's still fragmentary, but my purpose is becoming clearer. And what is that purpose? She asked quietly. To prevent the unraveling, the collapse of dimensional boundaries that separate incompatible realities. He looked up at the night sky, seeing beyond Vissi. BLE stars to the complex dimensional lattice that maintained cosmic order. I'm a guardian of structure itself, it seems. They reached the school gates where their paths would diverge. Rossweisse Street. You eyed him with an unreadable expression before speaking. Most beings would find such cosmic responsibility overwhelming, she observed. Yet you seem remarkably composed for someone remembering they. Essentially a universal maintenance system. Issei laughed, a surprisingly human sound given the gravity of their discussion. Maybe that's why I chose to incarnate as human in the first place. To remember what I'm actually protecting. Quote, a small smile curved Rossweisse's lips. A practical approach. Very Norse of you. I'll take that as a compliment, he replied with answering smile. As they parted ways, Issei found himself reflecting on the day's revelations. Between ancient Norse manuscripts, dimensional anomalies, and unexpected encounters with primordial dragon gods, his understanding of his true nature had expanded significantly. Yet alongside cosmic awakening, he found himself equally aware of growing connections to beings bound within conventional reality, Rias with her compassionate strength. Rossweisse with her analytical brilliance. These connections anchored him to humanity in ways his cosmic self might once have considered inconsequential but his human experience recognized as profoundly meaningful. Perhaps that balance, cosmic awareness tempered by human connection, was exactly what he needed to face whatever approached across dimensional boundaries. Cherry blossoms drifted across ancient temple grounds as high school students chatted excitedly, taking photos and buying souvenirs. To casual observers, the Kuo Academy's second-year class trip to Kyoto appeared entirely ordinary, teachers herding students between historical sites, teenagers alternately bored and fascinated by cultural landmarks. Only 3 individuals among them perceived the dimension. Instabilities rippling beneath Kyoto's serene surface. Another fluctuation, Rossweisse murmured, standing beside Issei as students explored Kiyomizu-dera Temple. That's the 7th since morning. Issei nodded, tracking the subtle distortion as it rippled through nearby cherry trees before dissipating. They're increasing in frequency but not intensity. Still containable. On his other side, Rias maintained a pleasant smile while keeping careful watch over both her fellow students and the dimensional anomalies. As the third chaperone for their class group, she had positioned herself strategically close to Issei throughout their first day in Kyoto. The local yokai are taking notice, she observed quietly, nodding toward a seemingly ordinary temple worker whose movements betrayed subtle inhuman grace. That's the third disguised kitsune I've spotted watching us. Not surprising, Rossweisse replied. Kyoto's yokai community maintains sophisticated detection systems for supernatural disturbances. A visiting cosmic entity wasn't going to go unnoticed. The tension between the two women had evolved over the past week from wary observation to cautious professional respect. Though neither fully trusted the other's faction, they'd established an effective working relationship centered around monitoring Issei's increasingly frequent dimensional effects. "We should expect a formal contact soon," Rias predicted. "Yusaka doesn't allow unannounced supernatural activity in her territory without investigation." As if summoned by her words, a small girl in a traditional shrine maiden outfit appeared beside them. Golden eyes gleaming with intelligence beyond her apparent years. Honored visitors, she greeted them with perfect formal manners. "My mother requests your PR. Essence at Fushimi Inari Shrine once your school obligations conclude today. A private tour has been arranged." Despite her childlike appearance, the spiritual energy emanating from the girl marked he R clearly is a powerful yokai, specifically, a multiple-tailed kitsune of noble lineage. "We would be honored," Rias responded with equal formality. "Please convey our acceptance to Lady Yusaka." The girl smiled, revealing slightly pointed canines. "I am Kuno, daughter of Yusaka. I will personally guide you when the time comes." With a polite bow, she disappeared into the crowd of tourists. "Well, that was direct," Rossweisse commented, sending the heir herself as messenger. "Curious, not threatening," Issei noted, having sensed the young kitsune's emotional state. There was genuine interest rather than hostility in her approach. Their discussion was interrupted as Asia Argento, a gentle blonde student recently transferred to their class, approached with obvious excitement. "Issei-san, Bushu, the view from the main hall is amazing," she exclaimed, seemingly unaware of the supernatural conversation she'd interrupted. Though technically a devil in Rias's peerage, Asia retained the innocent enthusiasm of her human origins. "We'll be right there," Rias assured her with genuine affection. As they followed Asia toward the temple's famous wooden platform overlooking the city, Issei felt a sudden shift in local dimensional stability, stronger than previous fluctuations and centered directly beneath them. "Wait," he called sharply, grabbing Asia's arm just as the wooden NKS beneath her feet shimmered with unnatural energy. The timely intervention prevented disaster as a small dimensional pocket opened exactly where she would have stepped, a brief window into howling void that snapped shut seconds later. "What was that?" Asia whispered, wide-eyed as Issei pulled her to safer ground. "Unstable footing," Rossweisse answered smoothly, already casting subtle magical barriers to prevent human students from approaching the affected area. "This is an ancient structure, after all." While Rossweisse managed the human students in Asia, Rias moved closer to Issei, concern evident in her lowered voice. "That wasn't like the other anomalies. It formed directly in her path." "Targeted," Issei agreed grimly. "Something is actively testing my responses, using nearby humans as catalysts." This development significantly escalated the potential danger. Previous dimensional fluctuations had been passive side effects of his awakening. An intelligent force deliberated. Why creating breaches around vulnerable bystanders represented a calculated threat. "We need to complete the school activities quickly and meet with Yusaka," Rias decided. "If something's targeting humans in her territory, she needs to be informed immediately." Issei nodded agreement while extending his awareness throughout the temple complex, establishing a temporary stabilization field similar to what he'd created at Kuo Academy. The process required more effort here. Kyoto's natural dimensional properties resisted external manipulation, the city's ancient spiritual foundations maintaining their own equilibrium. By late afternoon, they had managed to complete the scheduled temple visits without further incidents, though Issei detected multiple attempted breaches blocked by his stabilization field. Each attempt grew more sophisticated, probing for weaknesses in his defenses with increasingly complex dimensional mathematics. As the main student group returned to their hotel, Rias informed the lead teacher that she, Issei, and Rossweisse had been invited to a special cultural demonstration at Fushimi Inari Shrine, a plausible cover story that required minimal magical suggestion to accept. Kuno awaited them at the shrine entrance as promised, her small form dignified in traditional attire. Behind her, the shrine's famous thousands of vermilion torii gates stretched up the mountainside, creating a tunnel-like pathway that Issei immediately recognized as more than decorative. "The gates are dimensional stabilizers," he observed with appreciation, ingeniously disguised as cultural artifacts. Kuno's eyes widened slightly. "You perceive their true nature at a glance." Mother said you were unusual, but few visitors recognize Inari's dimensional engineering. Issei perceives many things others miss. Rias commented with a hint of pride. The young kitsune studied Issei with renewed interest before gesturing for them to follow her through the gates. This way, please. Mother awaits at the inner sanctuary. Quote, as they proceeded up the mountain path, Issei noted how each torii gate subtly reinforced dimensional stability, the cumulative effect creating one of the most secure dimensional boundaries he'd encountered on Earth. The engineering principles combined spiritual, mathematical, and geometric elements in harmonious balance. Your mother's work? He asked Kuno as they walked. The girl shook her head. The original design dates back thousands of years, though my mother has enhanced the system considerably. Kyoto has always been a dimensional nexus point requiring careful management. After ascending hundreds of stairs through countless gates, they reached a section of the shrine not open to ordinary visitors. Kuno placed her small hand against an unremarkable wooden door, channeling yokai energy that caused ancient protections to recognize and admit them. Beyond lay not another shrine building but an expansive traditional garden impossible in normal space, clearly a pocket dimension crafted with extraordinary skill. Flowering trees surrounded a central pavilion where a striking woman awaited them, golden fox ears and multiple tails visible, rather than concealed as they would be among humans. Welcome to Kyoto, Yusaka greeted them, her voice melodious yet commanding. Though I suspect, welcome back, might be more appropriate for one of you. Her golden eyes fixed on Issei with unmistakable recognition, though he had no conscious memory of meeting her before. You know me, he asked directly. Not you specifically, she clarified, gesturing for them to join her beneath the pavilion. But I recognize what you are. Boundary keepers have visited Kyoto in ages past, though none in my lifetime. This information intrigued Issei. You have records of previous visits. More than records, Yusaka replied as they seated themselves on cushions around a low table where tea had been prepared. Kyoto itself stands as testament to your kind's work. The dimensional architecture underlying our city bears the unmistakable signature of cosmic engineers. As Kuno served tea with practiced grace, Yusaka addressed Rias and Rossweisse with diplomatic courtesy. Devil Princess, Valkyrie Warrior, your presence alongside a boundary keeper suggests interesting political developments in your respective factions. We represent our own interests in this matter. Rias replied carefully. While our factions are certainly concerned about recent dimensional anomalies, our association with Issei predates official involvement. Yusaka's expression remained neutral, though her multiple tails swayed slightly, a tell that Issei somehow knew indicated thoughtful consideration. Fascinating, she murmured before returning her attention to Issei. I've sensed the disturbances throughout my city since your arrival. Normally, I would consider such disruptions hostile action, but the patterns suggest uncontrolled awakening rather than deliberate interference. Your assessment is accurate, Issei confirmed. My cosmic nature is reawakening gradually, causing unintentional dimensional resonance. I've implemented temporary stabilization measures, but they're proving increasingly difficult to maintain. Because Kyoto actively resists external dimensional manipulation, Yusaka nodded understanding. Our city's foundations include safeguards specifically designed to prevent unauthorized reality alterations. Which is exactly why I needed to come here, Issei explained. Kyoto's natural dimensional properties might help regulate my awakening if I can synchronize with the existing framework instead of fighting against it. Yusaka's eyes widened slightly, reassessing him. You seek harmonic integration rather than override. Unusual approach for a cosmic entity. Issei retains his humanity despite his awakening, Rias interjected, a hint of protective pride in her voice. He seeks cooperation rather than dominance. The Kitsune leader studied them both, elegant brows rising slightly as she observed the evident connection between them. Her gaze shifted briefly to Rossweisse as well, noting the Valkyrie's attentive posture nearby. Interesting companions for your journey, she commented to Issei with subtle amusement. Devils and Valkyries historically make poor allies for cosmic neutrality. I value perspective over politics. Issei replied simply. Yusaka seemed to approve of this answer, her expression warming. As do I, which is why I invited you here rather than simply demanding your departure from my territory. She set down her teacup deliberately. Now, to practical matters. The dimensional disturbances in Kyoto have escalated beyond passive fluctuations. Something is actively creating breaches. Using your energy signature as a template. We noticed, Rossweisse confirmed. An incident at Kiyomizu Dera nearly claimed one of our students. That was merely the most obvious attempt, Yasaka informed them gravely. My agents have contained 17 other breaches throughout the city today alone. Whatever forces these incursions, it grows bolder and more precise. Issei absorbed this troubling information. The breaches are being created by void harbingers, entities that consume dimensional boundaries. I encountered one previously in the underworld. The old enemy returns, Yasaka murmured, echoing Ophus's warning. Legends speak of times when the boundaries grew thin and void predators emerged. In those times, boundary keepers walked among us to restore dimensional integrity. I believe that's why I incarnated as human, Issei said, voicing a theory that had been forming since his encounter with Ophus. Something within cosmic awareness recognized approaching danger. ND placed me here specifically to counter it. Yet you incarnated without full memory or power, Rossweisse observed. Why handicap yourself if danger was imminent? Safety protocols, perhaps, Saka suggested before Issei could respond. Cosmic powers fully unleashed without proper control could cause more damage than the threat they're meant to counter. The explanation resonated with Issei's fragmentary memories, a sense that his gradual awakening was indeed deliberately designed rather than accidental. Whatever the reason, Rias interjected practically, we need to address the immediate threat. If these harbingers continue targeting humans in Kyoto, casualties become inevitable. Yasaka nodded gravely. Agreed. Which is why I propose a joint operation. She turned to Issei. Cosmic authority combined with Kyoto's existing dimensional framework could create a comprehensive defense system. With my knowledge of the city's spiritual architecture and your innate understanding of dimensional mechanics, we could establish protections beyond what either of us could manage alone. The proposal made perfect sense to Issei. Despite only just meeting Yasaka, he sensed both our genuine concern for her territory's inhabitants and her impressive technical understanding of dimensional principles. I accept, he decided without hesitation. When do we begin? Immediately, Yasaka replied, rising gracefully. The primary dimensional nexus beneath Kyoto connects all major shrines and power points. We'll need to synchronize your cosmic signature with the existing matrix from the central node. As they prepared to depart for this central node, Kuno approached Issei with curious golden eyes. Are you really from beyond the stars? She asked with childlike directness. The innocent question made him smile. In a manner of speaking. Though currently I'm just a high school student trying to remember how to be something more. Mother says you're older than the mountains, Kuno persisted. But you look like the other human students. Appearances can be deceiving, Issei replied gently. Your mother appears human to tourists, after all. Kuno considered this before nodding acceptance. Will you stop the bad things coming through the cracks? The question held childish phrasing but genuine concern. Issei knelt to meet her at eye level, answering with honesty rather than false reassurance. I'm going to try my very best, he promised. That's why I'm here. This seemed to satisfy the young kitsune, who smiled before returning to her mother's side as they prepared to depart. Yasaka led them deeper into the pocket dimension, past gardens and structures that gradually transitioned from traditional Japanese architecture to something far more ancient. Stones carved with symbols predating written history formed precise geometric patterns around a central courtyard where a massive cherry tree grew, its trunk wider than any natural specimen, branches extending impossibly far overhead. The heart of Kyoto, Yasaka introduced with reverent respect. The dimensional nexus point from which all ley lines in Japan originate. Even without his cosmic awareness, Issei would have sensed the profound power concentrated here. The tree didn't merely exist in physical space but extended roots through multiple dimensions simultaneously, creating natural pathways between realms. It's beautiful, he murmured, genuinely moved by the elegant cosmic engineering manifest in living form. Yasaka approached the massive trunk, placing her palm against its bark. This tree remembers the last boundary keeper who visited Japan, over 3,000 years ago, according to our records. Perhaps it will remember you as well. At her gesture, Issei stepped forward, rode to place his hand beside hers on the ancient trunk. The moment his fingers touched the bark, his consciousness expanded exponentially, connecting not just to the tree but to the entire dimensional network it anchored. Kyoto unfolded in his awareness like a multidimensional flower, layers upon layers of reality overlapping in harmonious patterns, ley lines flowing like luminous rivers between sacred sites. Protective barriers maintaining separation between human perception and supernatural realms. And beneath this magnificent structure, he sensed the disturbances, tiny fractures in dimensiona. Integrity where something pressed from outside, testing for weaknesses, seeking entry points. They're systematic, he observed, voice distant as his awareness remained expanded through the network. The breaches aren't random, they're mapping Kyoto's defenses, learning its patterns. Can you strengthen the boundaries? Yusaka asked, her own consciousness partially merged with the tree's awareness. Rather than answering verbally, Issei began integrating his cosmic signature into Kyoto's dimensional framework, not overriding its existing structure but enhancing it, adding layers of protectee. On that specifically countered void energy. The process felt natural, like remembering a skill long unpracticed but never truly forgotten. His fingers moved against the tree bark in complex patterns, leaving trails of silver-blue light that spread outward through the entire network. Rias and Rossweisse watched in fascination as the courtyard filled with manifestations of cosmic energy, geometric patterns of light that expanded outward in fractals too complex for conventional mathematics to describe. He's rewriting the dimensional protections for the entire city, Rossweisse whispered, her Valkyrie training allowing her to recognize some of the principles involved. That should be impossible without enormous ritual preparations. For most beings, yes, Yusaka confirmed, her own Conscio. USNESS still partially merged with the Nexus. But for a boundary keeper, it's their fundamental function. The process continued for nearly an hour as Issei methodically reinforced every dimensional boundary in Kyoto, working outward from the central nexus to the city's periphery. When he finally stepped back from the tree, the silver-blue light had faded from visible perception, though the projections remained active on dimensional levels. It's done, he announced, exhaustion evident despite his satisfaction. Kyoto's boundaries are now specifically reinforced against void intrusion. Any harbingers attempting to breach will be automatically contained and redirected to a specialized holding dimension. Yusaka studied the modifications with evident appreciation. Elegant work. You've maintained all our traditional protections while adding entirely new defensive layers. She turned to him with newfound respect. Whatever you once were, boundary keeper, your skill remains undiminished. Before Issei could respond, a sudden pulse of alarm rippled through the dimensional network, an urgent warning from the outermost boundaries. Multiple breaches forming simultaneously, Yusaka translated, her expression darkening. All around the city perimeter. A coordinated attack, Rossweisse realized immediately, her combat instincts activating as she summoned her Valkyrie armor. They're testing the new defenses. Rias likewise prepared for battle, crimson energy gathering around her hands. How many breaches? 17. No, 23, Yusaka reported as information flowed through the network. Forming a perfect circle around Kyoto. Issei extended his awareness through the newly reinforced boundaries, sensing the nature of the attack. What he discovered sent a chill through him. These aren't just harbingers, he informed them grimly. Something larger is coordinating them, a void architect. What's a void architect? Rias asked sharply. A higher order dimensional predator capable of strategic planning, Issei explained, already moving toward the courtyard exit. Harbingers are like scouts or drones, but architects can actually design and implement complex dimensional operations. Can your reinforcements hold against such an entity? Yusaka asked, following swiftly with her 9 tails fanning behind her. Temporarily, Issei answered honestly. The architect will analyze and adapt to each defensive measure. We need to directly confront it before it deciphers the entire protection matrix. They emerged from the pocket dimension back into Fushimi Inari Shrine, where Kuno awaited with several kitsune guards. The young girl's expression showed concern beyond her years. Mother, the boundaries are under attack, she reported unnecessarily. Our agents report strange creatures appearing at all major shrine locations. Coordinate our forces to protect civilians, Yusaka instructed her daughter. Focus on evacuation rather than engagement. As Kuno departed to relay these orders, Yusaka turned to their small group. The fastest way to reach the perimeter is through the Torii gates. They function as a transportation network when properly activated. We should split up, Rias suggested practically. Cover more ground. Issei considered this before shaking his head. Against harbingers, perhaps, but a void architect is beyond conventional supernatural abilities. We need to locate and confront it directly, as a unified force. Where would this architect be positioned? Rossweisse asked, her tactical mind already analyzing possibilities. Issei closed his eyes briefly, consulting both the dimensional network and his fragmentary cosmic knowledge. Somewhere with natural dimensional thinness, but providing overview of the entire operation. Likely a high point with spiritual significance. Kiyomizu stage, Yusaka concluded immediately. The temple platform where the earlier breach occurred. It sits at the Junctio. N of 3 major ley lines and offers direct line of sight to most of Kyoto's spiritual landmarks. Without further discussion, Yusaka led them to a specific Torii gate, placing her hand against it to activate its transportation function. This will take us directly to Kiyomizu Dera. Be prepared for immediate engagement. If your assessment is correct, the architect will have defenses in place. He whirled blurred around them as they passed through the activated gate, space compressing and expanding in a controlled manner that deposited them instantly at their destination. Kiyomizu Dera had been evacuated, its famous wooden stage now eerily empty in the fading evening light. But the air above it shimmered with unnatural distortion, a thin vertical line of absolute darkness that seemed to absorb both light and dimension itself. There, Issei pointed, the architect hasn't fully manifested yet. It's still mostly between dimensions, coordinating the harbingers remotely. As if hearing his assessment, the dark line pulsed and widened, expanding into a rectangular void from which emerged a figure that defied conventional description, not quite humanoid, not quite geometric, its form constantly shifting between states of matter and energy that shouldn't coexist. Primordial sage, it addressed Issei directly, its voice somehow simultaneously silent and deafeningly loud. You have awakened insufficiently. Your presence creates imbalance, while your intrusions maintain perfect harmony. Issei countered, stepping forward as cosmic energy gathered around him. You're violating fundamental boundary protocols. The architect's form rippled with what might have been amusement. Protocols established by your kind to maintain artificial separation. The natural state is convergence, not division. This philosophy confirmed Issei's worst fears. The entity before them wasn't merely a predator seeking energy but an ideological opponent, one that fundamentally rejected the cosmos. Architecture boundary keepers maintained. Convergence leads to collapse, Issei stated, certainty flowing from his deepest memories. Incompatible realities cannot occupy the same dimensional space without mutual destruction. An assertion without evidence, the architect dismissed. Your kind has prevented natural convergence for eons. We seek to restore the original state, all possibilities existing simultaneously. While this cosmic debate continued, Rias, Rossweisse, and Yusaka had taken strategic positions around the platform. At a subtle signal from Yusaka, all three launched simultaneous attacks, devil magic, Valkyrie runes, and Kitsune fire converging on the architect from different angles. The combined assault would have obliterated most supernatural entities. Against the architect, it merely caused its form to temporarily destabilize before reconstituting. Conventional energies cannot affect that which exists partially beyond conventional reality, it informed them with something like condescension. Your mortal perspectives limit your effectiveness. In response, Issei stepped forward, fully embracing his cosmic nature. Silver blue light emanated from his form as he accessed deeper levels of his true power, imposing fundamental spatial laws upon the localized area. Perhaps they can't affect you directly, he acknowledged as reality around them solidified into more rigid parameters. But I can limit your dimensional flexibility in this space. No phase shifting, no existing between states. While within this enforced space, you're bound by unified physical laws. The architect's form suddenly became more defined, still alien and geometrically impossible, but now constrained to consistent physical properties. Its displeasure manifested as distortions in the air around it. Artificial constraints, it hissed. Temporary and limited, but sufficient, Issei countered, nodding to his allies who immediately launched a second coordinated attack. This time, Their combined powers struck with visible effect, causing the architect's now solid form to recoil. It responded with its own attack, void tendrils lashing out simultaneously toward all four opponents. Yasaka countered with foxfire barriers while Rias deployed her power of destruction to disintegrate the tendrils aimed at her. Rossweisse's runic shields deflected those targeting her. The impact sent her sliding backward several meters. Issei faced the architect directly, meeting its void energy with focused cosmic authority. Where their powers collided, reality itself trembled. Fundamental forces briefly suspending as incompatible energies contested for dominance. Your awakening remains incomplete, the architect observed during this stalemate. You cannot maintain this evil of manifestation for long in your current state. The assessment was unfortunately accurate. Issei felt the strain of channeling cosmic power through his still partially human form, a burning sensation throughout his being as his current vessel struggled to contain energies it wasn't fully designed to manage. But what the architect failed to understand was the advantage Issei's human experience provided, specifically the concept of cooperation that cosmic entities rarely comprehended. I don't need to maintain it alone, he replied, extending his awareness to connect with the three powerful beings fighting alongside him. With their permission, granted through instant understanding rather than verbal communication, Issei established a temporary synchronization between their diverse energies, devil, Valkyrie, yokai, and cosmic power harmonizing in a unified pattern that expanded his spatial enforcement field. The architect realized too late what was happening. As the synchronized energies locked it into increasingly rigid dimensional constraints, its form lost more of its extra-dimensional properties, becoming fully subject to the natural laws of this reality. This changes nothing, it insisted. Though its voice had lost some of its otherworldly resonance. I am merely an extension. The convergence approaches regardless of your temporary victory. Perhaps, Issei acknowledged, maintaining the unified energy field as Yasaka, Rias, and Rossweisse moved into final attack positions. But not today, and not in Kyoto. With perfect synchronization, the three women channeled their respective powers through the framework Issei maintained, creating a triangular containment formation around the increasingly solidified architect. Now, Issei commanded, imposing final dimensional locks as their combined attack struck from three directions simultaneously. The architect's form imploded under the precisely coordinated assault, collapsing into a singularity similar to the contained harbinger from the underworld incident. Issei immediately encased it in multiple layers of dimensional constraints before absorbing it into a pocket dimension for later study. As the immediate threat dissipated, the strain of maintaining such high-level cosmic manifestation caught up with Issei. His knees buckled as the silver-blue aura faded, his consciousness threatening to follow. Rias reached him first, supporting him before he could collapse entirely. Easy, she murmured, concern evident in her voice. You pushed too hard. Had to, he managed, leaning against her more heavily than he'd intended. Architect was right about one thing. My awakening is still incomplete. Couldn't have contained it otherwise. Rossweisse joined them, her professional demeanor temporarily set aside as she helped stabilize him. The synchronization field was brilliant improvisation. I've never experienced anything like it. Nor have I, Yasaka agreed, approaching after verifying the dimensional stability of the area. Combining such diverse energies should have been impossible, yet you created perfect harmony between them. Issei managed a tired smile. That's ultimately what boundary keeping is about. Not just separation, but appropriate integration. Finding balance between isolation and convergence. The philosophical implication wasn't lost on any of them. Though each presented different supernatural factions with historically complex relationships, they had just demonstrated perfect coordination against a common threat. The Harbinger incursions have ceased, Yas. AKA reported after checking the dimensional network. Your reinforcements held, and without the architect's coordination, the remaining entities retreated. Temporarily, Issei cautioned, gradually recovering his strength. This was a test, both of Kyoto's defenses and of my current capabilities. They'll analyze the results and adapt their approach. Rias questioned. You believe there's a greater intelligence behind these attacks? Issei nodded grimly. The architect mentioned the convergence as something inevitable, regardless of today's outcome. That suggests an organized movement, and rather than random predation, a deliberate effort to break down dimensional boundaries. For what purpose? Rossweisse asked, her analytical mind already seeking patterns. That's what I need to remember, Issei admitted. The answer exists in my cosmic memory, but it remains fragmented. Something about an ancient schism between different philosophies of reality management. Yasaka helped H.I.M. to a nearby bench as they discussed implications. Whatever the motivation, Kyoto is now better protected thanks to your intervention. The reinforcements you've implemented should hold against similar incursions. For now, Issei agreed, but we should expect escalation. The pattern so far suggests increasing sophistication with each encounter. First individual harbingers, then coordinated attacks, now an architect. Something larger is testing boundaries worldwide, learning from each interaction. The sobering assessment hung in the evening air as they contemplated implications. After a moment, Yasaka straightened with renewed purpose. Kyoto has stood as a dimensional nexus point for millennia, weathering numerous supernatural conflicts, she stated with quiet confidence. We will adapt our defenses based on today's experiences and share information with other yokai strongholds throughout Japan. The devils will do likewise, Rias assured them. My brother has already initiated protocols for strengthening dimensional barriers around major underworld access points. And Asgard stands ready to deploy additional resources, Rossweisse added. Odin-sama has prioritized dimensional security since the first Harbinger sightings. Their unified response hardened Issei despite his concerns about future threats. Whatever cosmic conflict approached, he would not face it in isolation as his kind traditionally had. The connections he'd formed, both personal and political, offered perspectives and resources his purely cosmic self might never have considered. As they prepared to return to their respective responsibilities, Yasaka approached Issei with formal dignity. Boundary Keeper, she addressed him with ancient respect, Kyoto acknowledges its debt to you. Should you require our assistance in your awakening journey or in confronting future threats, the yokai of Japan stand ready. The formal alliance offer carried significant supernatural political weight. Yasaka was essentially pledging one of the world's oldest and most powerful yokai factions to Issei's cause. I am honored by your trust, he replied with equal formality before adding more personally, ND grateful for your direct assistance today. The synchronization wouldn't have been possible without your willing participation. Yasaka's expression warmed slightly. You are unlike other cosmic entities I've encountered in our histories. They maintained distance from lesser beings, while you seek genuine cooperation. My human perspective has certain advantages, Issei acknowledged with a smile. After arrangements were made for their return to the student hotel without arousing suspicion, Yasaka and her Kitsune escorts departed through the Torii transportation network, leaving Issei with Rias and Rossweisse. We should return before our absence is noticed, Rias suggested practically. The class supervisor was already questioning our special cultural tour excuse. As they ed through quieter streets toward their hotel, Issei found himself flanked by both women, each supporting him subtly as he continued recovering from power depletion. Your synchronization technique was remarkable, Rossweisse commented. Professional interest temporarily overcoming her usual reserve. The mathematical harmony required to align such disparate energy signatures should have been computationally impossible. It wasn't calculation, Issei admitted. More like intuitive recognition of compatible patterns. I could perceive how your runic structures, Rias's destruction energy, and Yasaka's spiritual fire could interlock despite their different fundamental properties. Cosmic perspective has practical applications, Rias observed with a small smile. Though the cost seems significant, you're still pale. Channeling that level of cosmic authority through a partially human form is taxing, he confirmed. My physical vessel isn't fully adapted for such power throughput yet. Rossweisse noted perceptively, you expect further physiological changes as your awakening progresses. Issei nodded. My human form is gradually adapting to accommodate more of my true nature. It's a necessary transition if I'm to face what's coming. Will you? Rias hesitated before asking the question clearly troubling her. Will you remain human in any meaningful sense once fully awakened? The concern behind her question touched him deeply. Worry not for cosmic implications but for him personally, for the connection they'd established. I believe so, he answered honestly. My decision to incarnate as human wasn't arbitrary but purposeful. The perspective gained through this experience has value I'm not willing to sacrifice, even as I reclaim cosmic awareness. His answer seemed to reassure both women. Though in different ways, Rias's concern was clearly personal, emotional investment in their relationship regardless of supernatural politics. Rossweisse's interests, she appeared more complex, professional curiosity intertwined with growing personal connection to the individual behind the cosmic entity. As they approached the hotel, Issei found himself reflecting on how profoundly his human experiences had already influenced his cosmic perspective. Emotions, relationships, the value of limited mortal perspective, these weren't weaknesses but essential balances too. The detached cosmic awareness of a boundary keeper. Perhaps that integration, cosmic power guided by human connection, was exactly what was needed to confront whatever force drove the convergence. An approach neither purely cosmic nor merely mortal, but something new that incorporated the strengths of both. The thought gave him hope despite the escalating threats and fragmented memories. Whatever challenges approached across dimensional boundaries, he would face them not as an isolated cosmic entity but as Issei Hyodo, a being of dual nature with connections in both realms. And those connections, he was increasingly certain, might prove the decisive factor in the cosmic balance to come. Chapter 2 End. The End. Remember to subscribe and like this video. See you in the next video.